In this interview, you'll hear from Jack Larkin, Project Specialist of the School Climate Transformation Grant. The grant was awarded to the System of Supports Department in the Student Services and Programs Division in 2019. It is a 5-year federal grant that serves 11 of our county's small and rural school districts. Fun fact is that of the selected grant recipients, SDCOE's proposal was the only one that focused on small rural districts.
If you wouldn't mind, could you just tell me a little bit about your experience working with grants and what that's been like for you?
Sure. So I'm just finishing my 2nd year working with the School Climate Transformation Grant. This is my first experience leading a grant. Previously, I was a teacher for 10 years and a site administrator. So working with grants has been fairly new to me, but it's been very exciting and very rewarding so far.
What has been a challenge for you with this particular grant?
I think just getting used to my role, for what I would say is, further back from the school site. I feel like previous roles, working closer with people and being able to work, more shoulder to shoulder with people is more my comfort zone. And so I've had to get used to how can I work with multiple school districts on a level where I'm coaching them and trying to work with them, but I'm not, working at their site all the time. I guess it's just been an adjustment period being at a county office level, where I have sort of a broader lens of more districts rather than being right there on site. That's been the most unique part of working in a grant for me.
And what type of training, if any, did you receive as part of your onboarding, either before you joined the county office to start with this grant or at your previous district? Was there any type of training that you received regarding grants?
Well, it's a PBIS grant, and so we get a lot of support from the PBIS Technical Center. So because it's a national grant, there are other people who are doing the same thing as me, and also specifically with other districts in California. And so I've gotten to be a part of meetings with the PBIS assistants, and gotten to see how other people in the same position as me are implementing the goals of the grant. And so that's really been the main training for me, is just specifically how to do the School Climate Transformation Grant. But because obviously the past few years have been very different, I wouldn't say that I had a whole lot of training on just working with grants in general. I haven't gotten a whole lot of training on that. It's more just been the technical assistance from this particular grant from the national level.
What do you think would have been helpful to you when you first joined and you were signed on to take on this particular grant? Going back now, knowing what you know, what do you wish you had been, either training you would have received or any type of strategies when you first started?
Just knowing where to start. I think I was just a little bit of a deer in the headlights of there were several different goals and measures that our grant is based upon. And I felt like I wanted to do all of them at the same time. And we were obviously all on Zoom and remote learning and distance learning for the schools. And so if I could go back in time, I would try to narrow down more of a starting point for all the districts rather than, trying to achieve everything all at once. I think that was, if I go back in time, to start at one place and move from there.
Okay. What are some of the tips that now you've picked up for yourself now that you are in the post-award phase, you're implementing your grant, you're probably right around your halfway point, if I'm not mistaken. What are some things you've learned? What are some tools of the trade that you now have in your toolbox?
Well, while I was pretty naive with grants, I feel like in every work I've ever done, whether it be in education or other fields that I've worked in the past, I always emphasize building relationships with people that I work with. And I think the one thing that's got me through this grant is that, even where I've made mistakes, I've really tried to emphasize building relationships with all the school districts that I work with. And it's allowed me to be able to communicate with them on a regular basis. And so I think that one tip that I would have is to try to, ingratiate yourself with the people that you work with, to make an effort to go on campus, to make an effort to build those relationships and listen to people, because it's allowed me now to have my formal relationship on meeting with people regularly with the grant, but also allowing me to feel comfortable making an informal phone call just to check in with someone and have that constant line of communication. And I think, like I said, at times where I felt lost, I always kind of fell back on a universal practice that I've always tried to do, is just build relationships with people. And that's allowed me to be more flexible and meet people where they're at.
Are there areas where you're still learning and growing and remaining curious about kind of grant world when we're looking at implementing these projects? And if so, what does that look like for you?
Well, I'm curious, to hear how other grants have sustained once the grant ends, because my goal with the School Climate Transformation Grant is for these practices to sustain for 20 years. And I've seen schools that haven't even necessarily been a part of this grant, but began the work of building a strong school climate, and it really has withstood time. And so I'm curious to see how other grants have measured success years after the grant has ended, because that would be the goal for our grant, is to see these practices become just a part of the school culture, and that sustains for a very long time.
What has been a highlight for you with this particular project?
A highlight for me is seeing the just previously what I was saying, the ownership that schools are taking. That there were times where they felt a bit lost of where to start, and now we're in the end of the second year. A real highlight for me is seeing the leads in the districts that I'm working with sharing what they're implementing at their school site and how it's directly impacting kids. And so what I was saying before, what I was trying to say is, sometimes when you're at a site, you can really see the impact that your work is doing for students and teachers and families. But when you're a little bit higher level is a bad way of saying it, but when you're a little bit above the fray, it's hard to see that. And so it's special for me to see that the work I'm doing with those schools is then transferring to work with the students on the site level. So that's really exciting for me, and it makes my work meaningful and motivates me to, keep working these next 2 years to see that grow even more.
Now, your grant is a federal grant. It was a fairly large federal grant that we had applied for. So federal grants are typically facilitated a little bit differently than a state grant or a foundation grant. And so you're actually starting with a grant project that has a kind of a higher standard of implementation. So I'm just curious for you, and you may not have been aware of that, but usually there's a lot more scrutiny when it comes to a lot of our larger federal grants. The reporting is sometimes at a more intense level. So I'm curious, what were some of your learnings around the reporting, and what those metrics have been for your particular grant? What was that process like for you?
That was me relying on other people, to be perfectly honest. That was me being glad that I worked for the SDCOE, because yourself, Felicia, Todd, in leadership and learning, sorry if I said that correct. Mm-hmm. That was where I really relied heavily on people at the county office, that people who have worked previously with grants and data reporting really helped me do that, because I would be lost without those people. While I felt like I had a background in the practices and strategies that we were trying to implement, I didn't have a background in reporting them on, like you said, on a federal level with these specific criteria. That was something that was very new to me. And so I was very lucky to work with people at the county office who are familiar with those type of standards for reporting a federal grant. And I relied on them and still rely on them very heavily. But now we're actually going to be reporting this coming week. And I feel much stronger in understanding what's needed and not being intimidated by those measures, because the first time we did it, I was very intimidated and scared that we weren't doing it with fidelity. And then over time, I've started to realize that we are. It's just a whole nother set of skills of being able to demonstrate, what you're doing and to make sure that you're meeting those goals that the grant has set forward.
Based on your experience, would you be interested in another large scale multi-year federal grant?
Yeah. I've taken to it now. I mean, there were times where I was like everyone, sometimes you want to gravitate to what your comfort level is. And this has taken me out of my comfort level. And I knew that taking on the job, I knew that I had the background in what this looked like on a campus, but I was taking a step out of my comfort zone on, like I said, on doing it on a broader level. And I just hadn't done that. And so I'm glad that I took that risk, and that, and my goal also was to reach more schools, that it could be something that was broader. And so now that I feel comfortable and I'm seeing success with this grant, yeah, I would be open to seeing what other types of grants are out there.
Just with grants in general, with your experience, what's the downside to a grant and what's the upside to a grant?
Well, the upside is, I think, the broader impact of reaching a larger group of people and perhaps making system change on a broader level. I think that's what really motivates me. A downside of working from a grant is perhaps at times feeling isolated and not having that interpersonal relationships that you would hope to have working in education. Always working in education, I just felt like I was so connected to school communities. And I feel like looking back on my career, it's the relationships that I'm always going to reflect upon. And so I felt like there were times where I missed that. But then over time, I've just learned that it's going to be a different type of situation in the position that I'm in. But the highlight really is that I feel very strongly that these practices can transform school climates. And so it's exciting to see how that can reach more school districts when you're working with a larger grant like this.
Absolutely. So my last question is, what would you say to someone that maybe found themselves in a similar situation as you a few years ago, where you were exploring a new job or new opportunity, but it had a grant focus? What would you say to somebody that's just starting on that journey or even just considering it?
I think, again, that it's exciting to step out of your comfort zone. I would be a definite example of someone who learned new skills by taking a position like this. And I think that you can never grow without taking a chance and taking a risk. And so I would encourage people to take a new role and see how their skills might translate to that. And they might be surprised that perhaps their skills in another area might be really valued, even though if they don't feel like they've had the experience working in a position like this.
Wonderful. Well, I want to share something with you. First of all, I really appreciate you taking the time, but I was excited when you said yes. And for me, I think sometimes people forget when we are involved in the initial stages of researching for a grant and putting together the application. And now this is one that I worked on and I partnered with Felicia to write it. And so I feel connected to this grant, even though, I'm not part of your regular meetings or whatnot. So I just want to share, for me to hear you talk about the impact that you're having really kind of gets me a little choked up, because I feel like that's part of my passion. And the role that I now have is helping to develop these programs, but then also to see a colleague to say, but I didn't know you were going to be the person that was going to be, doing this work. And so for me, it fills me in a really loving way. And I just wanted to express that to you, because sometimes people, I think, forget that we are involved usually in the very beginning. And then you all go and you implement and you're doing these great things. And we hear, oh, that's that one grant that we were able to help with. And so it's just wonderful to really hear the impact that you're having. And when I think back to, it was a very stressful application, as most federal grants are. We wrote in 11 of the small school districts, and that was challenging, because you're having to make sure you're speaking to everyone's unique needs. But then I feel like we've come full circle, and I know you're still just halfway and you have a lot more to do, but I just wanted to let you know, I was excited this morning because of chatting with you about it, because I felt like I get to hear what it was like for you, but I wanted you to also know I'm always like cheering for people in the background, even though I don't interact with you. I'm always like, yes, I hope that Jack's able to, do those MTSS trainings, and I hope that it's all coming together. And so when I hear little tidbits from Felicia, it really, really makes me happy, and it motivates me to continue to do what I do on the back end. So I'm excited that you're happy about doing the work. And I know sometimes people are a little scared of grants, and they might have had some horror stories, and it was a bad, process. And so I hope that for you, you continue on this path and know that grants can open doors, and you clearly are doing that every day. And you're, like you said, you had all of these skills before you walked in the door, and you're relying on them to implement this project that just so happens to be grant funded. Right. And so I appreciate your time. Is there anything that you'd want to maybe say to folks that are watching our video that would be, again, interested about grants or interested about learning more? Any last parting comments for them?
Well, no, just what you said, Gabby. Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you and Felicia did in establishing this grant. And so I just feel, my obligation to make it work, and to have the grant serve these school districts as it was designed to do. So I really appreciate all the work you've done for it. And I hope you can make it in May for our sort of culminating year. I think it might be interesting for you to see what each district shares on the work that they've been doing, so you can see what you've done and how it's affected the schools in a positive way. But I guess to other people in the grant, I do feel, for me, for my personality, I sometimes don't know if I'm the right person to head a big grant. But again, I feel I have the experience on the school site level to understand what it should look like on that level. So I came into the grant, again, a little bit intimidated that I wasn't the right person, perhaps, to do the larger administrative work. And that's something that I've really had to grow in the past 2 years. But I felt I had the heart for the work. And that's what's kind of kept me going, and I think has helped me. And so I would just say to other people who might feel the same way as I, is feeling intimidated and stepping into a different type of position, is that you might be surprised that, the skills that you do have might really benefit you in implementing it. And that over time, the other skills will come with hard work and just being willing to grow. And so that would be my only goal, is that I think grants really do need, at the heart of everything, they need the people who have the desire to make it to work, and then the other skills will come over time.
Oh, well said. Well said.